Terrific. Okay, so welcome to all of you. This is a webinar we started organizing, honestly, months ago when the first announcement of Metaverse's moves in healthcare happened. But we wanted to put the best panel together who could actually speak about this credibly. It is a new space, it's an evolving space. And so it was very important that we brought folks who've either experimented or experienced some of this to really understand from you where you believe the real use cases for metaverse and healthcare are, what's real and what's hype, and is this a short-term bet? Is this a long-term bet? What areas are ripe for intervention right now? And are we actually looking at a transformation, or are we just looking at a small value add? We'll get into all of that through the course of the conversation. But before we jump in, I just wanted to make sure we get a quick round of intros in. So I'd love to hear from each of you, your name, your title, obviously, and why you care about this topic, right? Why does metaverse and healthcare matter to you or get you excited? Or if you think it's a lot of hype, then maybe why it doesn't get you excited. So maybe we'll start with you, Kellee.
Thank you. It's so good to always participate. I think we're hearing a little bit of echo.
It's from your computer.
What do I need to do? So let me mute.
Okay, we'll start with Robin while you figure out your audio. Robin, would you like to go?
Sure. There always seems to be something that needs to be rectified when it comes to a Zoom call or any virtual call. But Robin Roberts, I am the co-founder and Chief Operating Officer of the Novartis Biome. The Biome is Novartis's extension into the digital health ecosystem, born out of the idea that, or the understanding that digital health was going to be an important or a critical part of the way that healthcare is delivered, the way that therapies are created, and the way that patients engage with healthcare. To answer your question more specifically, Chandana, you asked if I thought the metaverse itself was hype or not, and whether I was excited about it. I don't think it's hype, although I think the initial thoughts on the metaverse when it comes to healthcare are following the same trajectory that many new technologies follow, particularly in healthcare, which is the idea that it's everything and anything, and then quickly realizing that it's actually not everything, but maybe an important thing. And I think we're at the point now where we're starting to realize that that maybe it's not everything, but it is certainly an important piece of the puzzle. So I'm very excited about what the metaverse has to offer, and what the integration of healthcare in the metaverse will offer, and very excited to be on the call today and talk to everyone about it.
Terrific. Joe?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Joe Michaels. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at a company called HealthXL. We are a company founded a decade ago with the express purpose of bringing into the world realistic touch feedback technologies so that virtual environments are more realistic and more immersive. And we made a pivot early on away from games to enterprise and industrial use cases and applications and customers, and healthcare and medicine have always been at or near the top of our list of areas to bring our technology to. We'll talk a lot more about that today, but I'm all in. I'm 100% in on the metaverse. You know, it's hard to define it correctly. It's hard to know if we're all talking about exactly the same thing. I think of it, you know, as virtual worlds, the next stage of computing in a more immersive environment that's connected. We can talk more about that. But I think healthcare and medicine is low-hanging fruit for the metaverse and immersive tech and haptics. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that.
That's very interesting. Both you and Robin feel this way. I remember asking Robin a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I don't actually understand how this thing works. And he gave me a couple of nice use cases. We'll talk about that in a second. Kellee, hopefully your audio is working now.
Yeah, thank you for your patience. So my name is Kellee Franklin. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Mindful Innovation Labs. I have been working in and around these immersive technologies for the betterment of my career, spending 11 years with a company called Booz Allen Hamilton in the defense and intelligence space. So these technologies have in essence been around, but it's nice to see that they are now integrating into other industries, and Joe Michael's company HealthXL is taking them, of course, to the next level, where with having an emphasis on the user. And that's what gets me excited, is that when 81% of healthcare executives say that the metaverse is going to have a positive impact on their business, and it really is because these technologies are considering the patients and how it's going to impact their experience. It's exciting things. So thanks for having me here today.
Terrific. Welcome to all of you. And I'm Chandana. I'm the CEO at HealthXL. You're the experts. I'm going to do the asking of the questions and try to chime in where I've maybe come across a few anecdotes. Maybe we'll start with just getting us all on the same page about what is the metaverse. Is it the coming together of the virtual and real worlds with a lot of interaction and immersiveness? Is that how you would define the metaverse? What does it include? What does it exclude? Just so we're all talking about the same things.
Robin, what do you think?
Sure. So I think it's all inclusive of all of those pieces. It's the important part will be, in the theme of healthcare, it will be virtually, no pun intended, impossible to have it just be a virtual piece, for example, or to just have it be a piece that's just augmented reality, or vice versa. It'll have to be an incorporation of all of these different technologies that are actually going to make some of these a collection of what we would call endpoints in clinical studies, for example, possible. And the moment that we can start to integrate all of those different technologies on a singular platform, then I think we'll start to have a metaverse that actually creates value for patients and for the healthcare system. And that to me is the most important piece, right? If things can be, I'm a tech first kind of guy. I mean, obviously this is what I do, and I love technology, but the technology can be fantastic, but if it's not bringing value to the end user, in this case, the patient or the healthcare provider, then it's just a shiny toy that ends up getting, played with for a little while and then put down and never looked at again, as most toys do. So it's important that we as an industry, take this opportunity kind of by the horns and say, okay, how can we make this into something that is truly valuable for the patients and for the physicians that are delivering the healthcare, whether we're improving the interaction, whether we are making interactions that were impossible previously possible, or whatever it is that we're doing, ensuring that we are putting them at the center is going to be the key piece of the future for the metaverse.
Mm-hmm. So it's a sum total of all of the different technologies. Joe?
Yeah, I like to think simply about the metaverse. I think of it as everything that you're doing in terms of computation or simulation today in 2 dimensions, but now with the metaverse, we're in 3 dimensions. So in other words, we're not looking at screens, we're not computing on screens, we're not speaking to each other on screens, we're not connecting with each other on screens, through flat 2-dimensional interfaces. Now you're immersed in 3 dimensions, and you simulate and train in 3 dimensions. You work together and collaborate in 3 dimensions. And when you're networked, we're not just looking at flat postage stamp sized video pictures like we're all looking at one another right now, we feel as if we're in the same space. So it's a lot more than that, but I like to think simply about it because it extends so much of what we've already been doing for generations and just takes it to a new level with new capabilities that, as Robin said, and Kellee have said, should be all about the patient and better quality care for patients.
Yeah, I think that's really nicely put. Our team put down a list of, some of the technologies that actually would enable the metaverse in healthcare, and I'm just going to list them out in case I'm missing any that you could add them. So it would be virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, machine learning, haptics, NFTs, blockchain, robotics, digital twins. Anything we're missing in terms of technologies itself that will qualify? It's a good list.
None that I can think of, but I think it's important to point out that the combination of these different technologies is going to be the important piece, right? It's how they're utilized and combined together that will likely spur on new technologies that are created that then are impactful within the metaverse. So, I think of these almost as starting blocks, right? These are the starting blocks that we have, the foundation of what, how we can be at effect within the metaverse. Some of it is the foundations of how the metaverse actually functions, the security pieces, et cetera. Others are foundations of how you feel within the metaverse, which will be critical in the healthcare space. But as we move forward, I think we're quickly going to realize that there are going to be other technologies that maybe we aren't thinking of that currently exist that need to be incorporated, or, what's even more exciting will be new technologies that we'll need to create in order to be able to really deliver healthcare at the same level, if not a better level than we deliver it in real world. Yeah,
I think that's a really nice way to put it. So let's jump into actually where we think the impact, what use cases do you think will have the most impact in healthcare with the use of some of these technologies? Have we already reached that point, seen that impact, or do you think that's imminent? Kellee, would you like to?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of use cases that are already out there, which is to me exciting. And the upside, I guess, if you will, of the pandemic is that fast forwarded the acceptance by not only providers, but patients to the adoption of these types of technologies. So we really saw, and both of the other experts on the panel can speak more broadly about these impacts, but immersive training was more adopted and acceptable. Digital diagnostics was used over the course of the pandemic, virtual therapeutics, care planning and delivery, patient and caregiver wellness, and also digital currency. So the ability for patients to have more ownership over their data and the ability to pass that data to their different care providers. And Robin alluded to this, the being able to have the interoperability between these different technologies is something that needs to continue to be fleshed out, because as more technologies get added into the mix, that's certainly going to be not only from a security perspective, but from an efficiency perspective is going to be important.
So which one do you think, Kellee, will have the greatest impact in the short term?
Well, in the short term, you're going to want to have efficacy, efficiency, and experience. And so I look at the combination of those three. And I think experience is going to lead the way if people are feeling comfortable and that the product is doing what it's intended to do. And then efficiency, if you're creating greater efficiency within healthcare systems and you're reducing cost across those systems, that's a win for everybody. So I'd love to hear what Joe and the others have to say.
Sure, I'm not a mute, good. Again, taking a very simple approach, for me, I think of it as, big categories, big buckets like research, training, and treatment are kind of big areas that, we're moving from the 2D world into a 3D world. Just changes a lot. It doesn't change everything. As Robin was saying, it's not everything, but it's a game changer. And on the research side, you'll hear a lot about digital twins, making models of the real world environments, but they're digital and they're in 3 dimensions. And now you can do things with those objects that you can't do with something that's sketched on paper or on a screen. It's like real life, but it's virtual. So it's easily shared, it's safe, it's cost effective. And think of all the things you can do on the research side. I don't claim to be smart enough to even know what you can do on the research side, but I can imagine how all the things you can unlock there. And in terms of training, that's really the most exciting thing in the short term. I know we'll talk more later about kind of time frames, but training is massive. That is the training of all kinds of professionals in this industry. From the most basic skills and people on the front lines, EMTs, through nurses, doctors, physician assistants, surgeons, and all kinds of professionals in the space who use their skills and need a more efficient, safe, cost-effective, but realistic, scalable, I can go on and on with the adjectives, way to train. And so I hope we'll get into that more detailed. And then treatment. My gosh, I mean, it's heartwarming to think of the ways that virtual technologies can impact the way the way that you clinically treat patients in so many areas, from phobias to physical therapy to impacting surgery, to telehealth. It's mind-boggling how many things you can unlock when now you're working across the world from any distance in 3 dimensions with virtual representations of people and objects. So it's thrilling, and we could barely scratch the surface in the first 60 minutes.
Of course, I'm pretty intrigued that you mentioned digital twins. Like all the others, I've definitely seen indicators that this is happening as we speak. Do you actually think digital twins are a reality in the metaverse? I was quite surprised by that use case. Do you actually think it's current?
I think that it is current. We have the technology. We're just learning how to use it, quite frankly, but we have the technology to scan physical objects and create extremely accurate representations of them. The game, the computer game, video game industry has been working on what are called game engine platforms for years, which is what's gotten us to this wonderful point. And now we can use their learnings and their technologies to do something very similar, in medicine and other fields. And you don't even need to scan physical objects. You can take scan can be used very broadly. I mean, you can take the results of, and again, I don't want to try to speak outside of my capabilities in the medical field, but I know you can take pictures of patients. You can take pictures of, you can certainly use the 3D, you could use really the CAD models of medical instruments. You can create digital twin environments of an operating room or of a patient's environment. It's endless what you can do when you create 3D representations of something, and you can assign all kinds of critical properties to them, so that they have the right simulation. So it is, yes, that we know how to do it. We're beginning to do it. Soon, every hospital, every patient's area and every medical instrument will be mapped and represented in 3D, and it'll be we won't even be able to think of today of what you'll be able to do with all of that.
Very interesting.
Maybe I can just build on that a little bit, and I agree both with both Joe and Kellee on this, but I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate only to keep things spicy because it's early morning, so why not? What 1000% agree that the future is incredibly bright in the metaverse, especially when we talk about digital twins. I think that is the end goal, or not end goal, but that would be the prime goal that we have. But I think we as an industry need to be a little bit careful to ensure that we're thinking about this in the right way. The metaverse, like many other technologies, is going to be dependent on the network effect, right? The more people are utilizing it, the more people are willing to utilize it, the more technologies will be created to bring value, the more effective it will be, the more companies like Joe's company are going to come in and create these, different technologies and create these different capabilities. So in order to do that, we're going to need to ensure that we're thinking about the near-term value very, very clearly, so that we can get to the long-term value, which I think the digital twin piece is more of a long-term value, right? We can, Joe's absolutely right in that we should and can think about that and start to build that out today. But what's going to be extremely valuable to patients today, to physicians today, to the healthcare system today, is to take the technologies that already exist currently that can be incorporated into the metaverse and immediately start to bring value, right? I'll give you an example. There already exists technology that allows for a scenario where you're in the metaverse and you can walk into a clinic in the metaverse and be diagnosed for COVID, or have vital signs taken, or see a physician, and or have therapies prescribed to you, whether they be digital therapeutics or actual therapies that you can then go to a pharmacy and obtain. That is a scenario that can be created and is being created that could bring value today. Creating that kind of capability, that kind of value, will drive that network effect, which will make things like digital twins, the real concept and the real happening of the digital twin, a reality much, much sooner. So as an industry, we need to be very pragmatic about building that value today so that we can get to that value tomorrow.
I really like that. And I think that that there's a clear example of that, right? Robin, CVS, I think, have formed their virtual clinic in the metaverse, and they filed a patent, I think, to trademark some of their assets in the virtual world, et cetera. So I can totally see that. We have digital therapeutics already. We know how to do e-prescriptions. So we know how to do telehealth consults. So it's a nice kind of thread that's running through all of them. And I can see how that might be a short-term, quick way almost to really trial the metaverse experience, so to speak.
Right. And to Kelly's point earlier, I mean, the pandemic, as awful as it was, has a wonderful silver lining in that it got a lot of people that wouldn't have gotten over the hump in terms of utilizing technology, particularly in healthcare. I can think of my parents, for example, who, if I had told them in 2019 that, you can see your doctor via a telehealth visit, they would have, looked at me sideways and said, why would I do that if I can do it the way that I've always been doing it? But now they can see the value and have experienced the value in that telehealth visit. And now that's their preferred method, right? They're like, why would I leave my home if I can get everything that I'm going to get in seeing the doctor via this telehealth capability, as opposed to having to take a day off and go, into the office, spend 2-3 hours in from end to end, but only seeing the doctor for 5 or 10 minutes. If we can concentrate on ensuring that we take that already embedded kind of hook that exists in patients and in the healthcare system around the virtual capabilities that they've been already willing, as a result of the pandemic, to incorporate, and bring that into the metaverse with tangible value add that happens immediately, I think we will be in a much, much better place in the very near future when it comes to getting to those long-term goals.
Yeah. And I see some questions are trickling in, and I encourage everybody to send them, and I'll keep bringing them up at the right time. If you think about the different technologies that currently our healthcare providers and patients are using in orders of magnitude, we definitely have a higher number of people using telehealth, using some remote monitoring tools, wearables, and fewer people, I guess, using virtual reality, augmented reality, and some of the other technologies that we're talking about here that power the metaverse, right? So what do you think, how are we going to bridge that gap? Because it did take us a while to get that adoption on just your regular applications through your phone, etc. And we seem to have gained some traction on that front. But I do believe that we're still a little bit far away from getting that buy-in on some of these more advanced technologies, so to speak, or more immersive technologies, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad that the healthcare industry is conservative. I don't want the doctors who treat me to, use me as a guinea pig, every week with a new hot idea. However, that caution really does prevent important technologies from taking root, and there's a waiting, I think, for a sort of a critical mass, like a tipping point, before everyone dives in. I remember a time, I'm not that old, but I remember a time when in a doctor's office there was never a computer. It was or a computer screen in a treatment room. When you look at some of the tools that are being used, and they haven't changed in generations. I mean, I get calls from physicians and from people in the healthcare industry who are like on the leading edge. They're the ones who are saying, I'm not satisfied with what we have today. I'm willing to take the risk and push to try new technologies. My company's all about touch feedback. So, they're asking me for touch feedback solutions. And I'm so grateful that for those people who aren't willing to live with the status quo, and they drive and they push for experimentation, and they don't roll it out before it's ready. And God knows the FDA, keeps things, well reviewed before they're introduced to patients. But I'm really grateful for the people who insist on trying new technologies like mine and pushing the industry forward, because that's the only way you get past, that inertia.
Yeah.
And tangibly speaking, just to use the example that I was giving earlier with my parents, the hurdle that we have to jump here is something I think you can almost visualize it, right? With my parents, for example, the hurdle that they were not willing to jump pre-pandemic was actually picking up their phone and logging into the app for that particular healthcare system and clicking on the button for telehealth. That was the hurdle, physically, the hurdle that they did not want to overcome. They couldn't see themselves actually doing that, right? But once they did it, the value was obvious, right? For the metaverse, it's the same thing, except it's putting on the headset, right? If I talk to my parents today about putting on a headset, a VR headset, AR headset, they give me the same look that they gave me in 2019 and 2018 when I was like, you just got to log into this app. Well, why would I log into an app? That makes no sense, right? Same thinking, same process. But the moment that they put on that headset and they enter that metaverse and start to realize the value that can be brought to them as a result of that, putting on the headset becomes something that is as easy for them as opening that app is today.
Right.
I'm gonna just take that what my colleagues have said just one step further. I think the onus is a little bit on us as product developers and innovators to integrate education into our product delivery. And I don't think historically we've done a very good job of that. We get excited about a product and we launch it, and because we understand how to use it, we kind of assume that everybody else is going to be excited and know how to use it. So I would really love to see, as product developers and innovators, that we begin to, as part of just our standard operating procedures, that education is part of that. And then secondly, and many of my colleagues now do this, but not everybody, that engagement is part of the product development process. So you're going to have champions who are going to be vetted as you're developing your product. So by the time you launch the product, you already have a certain portion of people who are going to use the product already bought into the product, know how to use it, have kind of given a segment of kind of stamp of approval before it gets launched. So I think those are important things that we can do as product developers and people within systems, because I think anybody who has dealt with electronic medical records, that's an example of something that got rolled out. There wasn't a lot of great engagement or involvement of the people who had to use those things. And as anybody who has dealt with that, the adoption of electronic medical records had some difficulties. So those are some things that I would love to see as we move forward in this continued evolution of technology.
Absolutely. I'd love to maybe switch gears a little bit and think about two scenarios. Let's say we represent a healthcare system or a hospital. Is there a first mover advantage that I can have as a healthcare system to adopt or really get into the metaverse? What does it actually mean, right? Is there a first mover advantage, and how can I as a health system be prepared for a future of healthcare delivery that involves the metaverse?
I believe there is. Robin, did you want to jump in? I go ahead.
No, I agree, but you go ahead, Joe.
I believe there is a first mover advantage. In some ways, healthcare and medicine is no different than any other industry. If you can get value from a new technology, the earlier you try it, not to the point that you're testing and experimenting and doing things that are dangerous, but the earlier you can try it and learn from it and incorporate it, the more of an advantage you have in understanding it, in moving faster on the maturity curve, so that you know how to use it, put it to use, and it helps your patients, basically your customers, and frankly, the more you can contribute to the whole industry, because it's only once you get that flywheel going of use, learning, refinement, greater use, greater learning, greater refinement. That's how you benefit individually, and you attract the kinds of customers, and those customers could be very broadly defined. It's not just your patients, it's other professionals who want to be part of this and want to learn from this and want to use cutting edge technology, and it grows from there. So I mean, I think as long as you're doing it responsibly and you're doing it in conjunction with standards, organizations, and testing, yes, you absolutely should be on the bleeding edge, is sort of a funny way of thinking of it, but on the cutting edge of of technology, so that you get there yourself and everyone else there faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a first mover as a healthcare system is incredibly advantageous, but I would caveat that with what my colleague Kellee had talked about earlier, which is around ensuring that first mover piece comes with the right education, right? The right education for your patients to understand, so that they can obtain the maximum value out of it, right? So I'll give another example of what I mean by that. Telehealth, that capability, many healthcare systems had that for over a decade before, since probably 2010 or so, right? That button has always been there, with very, very few people actually utilizing it until the pandemic, when they had to utilize it, right? You had a number of first movers, first implementers in the healthcare system space, but they weren't really getting much value out of it. And the reason they weren't is because they failed to engage their patients appropriately, engage the end users appropriately, to make them aware of the value that they would get out of utilizing that process, that system, right? And I'm not saying that it was a lack of effort. I'm just saying they were unsuccessful at doing it. Now, one of the key pieces of value that I think first movers in this space in terms of a healthcare system and the metaverse would have is around being able to increase your patient population, right? And we already know that healthcare systems work on a very slim margin. And so increasing that top line by being able to expand your patient base is incredibly helpful. And they're all interested in this. I mean, in speaking to them in a number of different scenarios, they're all interested in it. They're just worried about that scenario that happened previously when it came to the telehealth piece, right? They're worried about putting in the upfront cost to incorporate this kind of technology and then having it sit there and no one really using it.
Got you. There's a really interesting question here. Do you think that, and it's very related to what we've been talking about, will the patient ever be forced to be in the metaverse?
Yes. Yes.
And that's why it's so important to do it right?
Well, absolutely. Yes. So it's a great question. The answer is yes, the same way that patients were forced at some point to use telehealth for 2 years or plus, right? It was because the environment dictated that's what was needed because it was the only option, right? There will be a point, I don't know when that future will be, but it will happen. There will be a point where you have to use the metaverse in order to see your physician, or at least to see your physician in, within the next reasonable amount of time, for example, right? And maybe even to be able to get your therapy, or maybe you may have to go into the metaverse to actually get treatment, right? To your actual digital therapeutic might be only found in the metaverse. And so if you have amblyopia, for example, the only therapy that exists for adults may be found only in the metaverse. So you have to go there. So yes, I think in the future that will be the case.
Well, and I, as a consummate optimist, I look at it as such an positive. So what historically used to take hours to bring thought leaders together to look at complex medical conditions can take, when I mentioned efficiency, it streamlines the opportunity to bring medical experts together to look at complex medical conditions and bring them together, and they can physically get into the body of a patient and solve problems and provide exceptional medical care. So again, Robin has mentioned several times the human value aspect of this. And so that goes back to my 3 points about efficacy, efficiency, and experience. If those 3 things are being met with these technologies, the forced nature of these technologies by the patient or the provider, I think, they're going to be satisfied. But it goes back to what all 3 of us have said, is that we got to educate. And one of the things that I think would be monumentally beneficial to the people who are tuning in today is, how can we do that as health systems and providers? So I don't know whether that looks like an innovation lab that's housed on your health system facility, so that patients and providers who are on your health facility can go in and try out these different technologies. Those 2 types of innovation labs are at GE Healthcare for their employees. And I know, Joe, you can probably speak to the lab that you have at the university. I mean, so these labs are set up for kind of internal growth and development. Why don't we share these with external so we can kind of begin the education process?
Yeah, patients, I think, come at this from a very selfish, naturally selfish perspective. Is this metaverse technology going to help me? Is this going to improve my treatment? Is this going to make me feel better? Is this going to connect me to doctors or treatments in a way that I couldn't get it before? And I think once they experience pain mitigation in a virtual environment, they'll never want to go back. They'll never want to. They'll never prefer, sort of physical, pain mitigation alone to something that's augmented by a virtual technology. Once they can see a world-class medical expert, through a really immersive telehealth environment that they would have had to wait days or weeks or months to see without that opportunity, they'll choose it. Once they can be taken through a procedure that they're in a virtual environment that they're about to go through to really understand it in 3 dimensions, they'll choose it. So I mean, I don't like to talk too much about forcing people into anything, but I just think that that's how these technologies get implemented and deeply rooted, is everyone sees the value and you reach that tipping point, and then you can't imagine it without a world without it.
Yeah. So I guess the unanimous answer is yes. It's only a matter of time before every patient will have to use the metaverse. We haven't spoken at all about pharmaceutical companies or any life sciences companies, but there's definitely a play here for them, right? What should they care about when it comes to the metaverse? What are some of the baby steps they need to take today so that they are prepared for this healthcare system that we're talking about of tomorrow? And Robin, I'm sure you're thinking about this a lot.
I am, yes. So, being in a large life science company, it's something that we think about quite often. I mean, look, it's clearly going to be part of the commercial space for life science companies. It's going to be part of the development space in the clinical research side for life science companies. Maybe at least from now, it's probably at a lesser level than on the commercial space, but it will definitely be on the development side in the digital therapeutic space, right? There are an astounding number of very effective, arguably more effective digital therapeutics that are available now than there are molecules that we're creating. I just recently at the health conference spoke to a company that has figured out a way to provide a digital therapeutic that allows patients with advanced MS to go from not being able to walk to being able to walk in a matter of a few sessions via this augmented reality engagement. That doesn't exist via a molecule or biologic currently. And the argument then would be, should it even exist via a molecule or biologic if it can be done, via digital therapeutic and provided at that level of efficacy? So we're constantly thinking about what that future looks like, because at the end of the day, the metaverse, is a platform. It's like the internet, right? There's a ton of things that are going to happen as a result of the existence of this platform. And either as a company, we are preparing ourselves for that evolution, or we're figuring out a way to go into a different business.
Interesting. Joe, have you worked much with life sciences companies? Preparing for the future?
Yeah, our technology can be used not just for virtual environments, but for teleoperated robotics. So our touch feedback can be used to enable anyone who wants to operate a version of their hands or their body in a remote location. And so the cool thing about that is, you can remove people from the dirty, dull, dangerous jobs, or distant ones where you can't be in that location, and use a robot to, to sort of represent you. And so I think in the life sciences world, there are a lot of environments that need to be completely clean, and you would rather have, you know, robot hands doing compounding or research or any number of things, and not you know, human hands on site. So that's a really exciting area, you know, for haptics is teleoperation of robots, you know, and so we do hear a lot about that, and I think that's a really fascinating area to explore.
Yeah, and it's quite advanced actually now. I mean, I actually just passed a while I was at Health this past week. I passed this display of a complete OR that was put up with robotic hands putting together a very intricate small model that you could argue a human doing it themselves with a pair of microscopes would not be able to achieve that level of efficiency and efficacy. And watching this robot being able to do it, almost effortlessly was amazing. And then realizing later that it was actually someone controlling that remotely was even more impressive, right? And the idea was that this is the level of intricacy that exists today that already allows for these remote surgeries to be able to happen. And that's what's available today. I mean, imagine where we will be 5 or 10 years from now, when this network effect takes place and there's much more engagement and technology that's being brought to bear.
Yeah, I think that's very optimistic, and the technologies have to be affordable as well, right? Because there's so much value in making something like this available and accessible, say, to remote populations and countries where perhaps there's not enough access to the right surgeons for certain conditions, but you could do this remotely, but in order to be affordable and accessible as well to everybody. A really relevant question from some of the audience here. I think we struggle with interoperability as is. The current status quo of EHRs, we're still talking about this challenge for decades now. So what is interoperability even going to look like once we've gotten so many additional elements into the mix?
It's a tough one. I mean, I certainly don't have answers for this industry. I've heard just how difficult it is, with the balkanization of systems, in this industry. It's almost, it feels like an almost impossible challenge. But fortunately, I think, when it comes to 3D technologies, metaverse technologies, what some people think of as Web3, we really are coming at it for other industries that have the same issues, and we're trying to develop standards, that will be useful for other industries that can be applied to this one. So, right now, when you're building a VR kind of project or environment, you're typically choosing between Unreal Engine and Unity are the two main, sort of simulation engines, and that really helps just having 2 and not 20. When once you get into networking and you're networking different people across, different locations, and, does one location talk to the other properly with the right amount of latency so it's safe and effective? There are complex questions that I know, we need as an industry, the same way Kellee said earlier, as an industry, we owe you certain things. I think we owe you, simplicity and standards. So, you don't have to worry about that down the road.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
I think, Shonda, to your earlier point about what technology that you mentioned on your list of things, I was in Cambridge and gave a presentation to a company up there, and the conversation was around LEO satellites. That was not a technology we mentioned earlier, but I think that has huge opportunity to revolutionize the combination with the metaverse. It was used in Hurricane Ian here in the United States to get the internet back up and running. And if you know much about internet connectivity around the globe. There isn't a lot of internet connectivity around the globe. And I think if, when we talk about interoperability, I think if there's more partnership with LEO satellites and the metaverse, we do have the opportunity to really get to areas that are more remote and provide accessibility and equitable healthcare in places, and really think differently about health in new and profound ways. And I don't know if Robin and Joe want to add to the LEO satellites, if they have any insights on that.
None on the satellites. I will add though to your comments, Kellee, and in agreement as well. I was talking earlier about the importance of bringing value to the end users, right? Whether it be the patients, the healthcare systems, the healthcare providers, et cetera. And to me, value has kind of two key pieces. There's arguably other pieces, but there's two key pieces. It's, what is it doing for me? And then it's how easy can I use it? How easy is it to use? What Joe was talking about earlier, and the question that you asked, Chandana, around the interoperability, is a question around the fundamentals or the foundation of how the metaverse is going to actually function, and that speaks to the ease of use. And the comment that I was making earlier is we have to, as an industry, understand that we need to bring near-term value. Otherwise, we'll never get to that network effect. If we don't solve for that really complex problem, that question that you asked is a very complex problem, and we create this mangle of things that we have, like what we have for EHR and EMRs today, just in the US, we're going to hamstring ourselves, and it will make it much more difficult for us to ever get to that point where we get to that network effect, because there will be less healthcare systems utilizing it. There will be less patients actually engaging in it, and there'll be less technology that'll be brought into it. And so we will do ourselves a favor by making sure that we figure out a solution to that problem.
I think that's really well put, because we could just throw new things on there, but if we don't solve some of the fundamentals, then we're going to be challenged. I think the current environment as well, and I was wondering, right, investments in the sector have gone down, and there's a global recession. We are seeing layoffs across some of the biggest tech companies. In fact, that's what's making the news. So, anybody who's looking at this right now or listening to this webinar right now is probably pretty skeptical about the opportunity that the metaverse presents right now, and whether we're really open to adoption. But perhaps that's much more of a current and short-term problem, rather than, and it's something that will solve itself or resolve, in the next year, possibly. Do you have any reflections on that?
Absolutely. Yes. Don't be discouraged by layoffs and contractions and setbacks. This is a long-term marathon, not a sprint. It is hard to develop these technologies. It is easy to get overexcited about it, hire too many people, fund it too much. It's a natural part of the order of things for there to be expansions and contractions. Just like the stock market, long term, it increases in value. It is a great investment. Look backward at the technologies that have become commonplace in this industry. They didn't expand without incident. Neither will the metaverse. We will define it very differently. We don't call it cyberspace or the information superhighway anymore. We think of it as the internet and apps and and the web, and a lot of it's evolved. I don't think we'll even use the term metaverse, frankly, in 10 or 15 years. It will evolve into productive, useful, technologies that are part of our everyday lives and our work. And a lot of the early players, quite frankly, I hope not my company, but others, will fall away. and you'll end up with the winners. And don't be discouraged at all. Make early bets. Go with what delivers value. It's easy to use and effective, as you've heard, and don't be discouraged.
That's a really nice concluding thought. Robin, any concluding thoughts from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to level set a bit, Galen Growth did a really interesting, or provided a really interesting report just recently that I happened to have contribute to, where they actually studied the investments in digital health companies over the last 18 months or so. And what the data shows is that investments have actually gone down for late stage companies, but it actually has grown for early stage companies. So there is plenty of opportunity. And to Joe's point, just to reiterate that, I mean, you should never let the macroeconomics dictate, when it's time to either start a company or invest in a technology. The macroeconomics are the macroeconomics. They constantly go up, they constantly go down. And the reality is, if you look into recent history, even long-term history in terms of the stock market, the downturns are much shorter usually than the upside, right? And so things tend to rise over a long period of time. Sure, there's a macroeconomic downturn now, you can argue, and maybe a bigger one to come in the near future, but there is certainly going to be another side to that, right? And the fact that there is a increased amount of investment in early stage company tells you that the idea around creating new technologies that are going to drive the future is still something worth investing in.
Kellee, any concluding thoughts from you?
I'll just repeat what I started out with at the outset of our conversation. 81% of healthcare executives said that the metaverse is going to have a positive impact on their health systems. So if we're not getting fully ensconced and educated and invested in the metaverse, we're going to be left behind. And so my hope is that the conversation today with my great colleagues, Robin and Joe, didn't convince you otherwise. My hope is that you'll do some research yourself and get excited about it, because it really is opportunities to really improve patient experiences and provider experiences, which is really why we're in this ball game to begin with. So thanks so much for having us.
It's been such an amazing hour. I can't believe 60 minutes just flew by. So thank you so much, Robin, Joe, Kellee, for all of your insights. It's been such a terrific learning session for me as well. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Good seeing everyone. Thank you.